You see it a little bit, as I said, in 1978's Dawn of the Dead. So this is what, 10-ish years later after the original Night of the Living Dead. And I didn't know this, but Fan Man was saying that Romero, that he made a deal with his writer. His writer, because the original Night of the Living Dead, they forgot to copyright it properly. It's in the public domain. They didn't really make all that much money, I don't think, on it and whatnot. So he made a deal with his screenwriter. His screenwriter got the rights to Living Dead, the phrase Living Dead. But Romero got the rights to Of the. So Night of the Living Dead, and this was Dawn of the Living Dead. Later he did a Day of the Living Dead. But so his sequel, even though there's a return of the Night of the Living Dead, or Night of the Living Dead 2, I think, that hit in the 80s, which the screenwriter did. Romero's sequel was Dawn of the Dead. And this was in 78, same year that Superman came out, and I watched that. I watched the original director's cut, the 2 hours and 20-minute version. And let me just say, first of all, amazing storytelling. I really do like the movie overall. I'm going to point out a little bit of the silly ideology you can see him, but you can really only see that kind of in retrospect, knowing the progression that he was on. It's nothing that really ruined the movie. I was just blown away by the storytelling of the movie. Because, in the first Night of the Living Dead, it starts out with this intimate setting, just Barbara and her brother. They're going to lay some flowers on their grandmother's grave. It starts out small, sort of close. And then, as the movie progresses, first they run into like a couple of zombies, but then soon like zombies are all around them, coming towards the house and whatnot. So it starts small, ramps up big. Dawn of the Dead does the opposite. It starts out in this television studio that's still trying to broadcast and still trying to get some, messaging out, but the zombie apocalypse has been going on for a while. And, you cut to the National Guard, I guess they are, trying to clear out civilians that are trying to stay held up in these certain buildings. So trying to herd the human population into one area to be safe or whatever. And so it starts out kind of a big scale deal, big, citywide scale, nationwide scale event. And it eventually zeroes in on these 4 characters as they made their escape and they eventually hold up in this shopping mall. And I thought it did that really well because even though it was a 2 hour and 20-minute film, it did not feel like that. It just kept you engaged every moment. It really, and you follow these characters like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And that was really great. So I love that about it. It did that very well. It's made in 1978, so maybe you see the zombies and they're not all that impressive or whatever. I mean, it's basically just people with sort of blue makeup on to look deadish, and there's some gore, as they try to like bite into people, especially one part at the end where they're eating this guy or whatever. But it's still, you might think, well, that's so cheesy according to today's standards. I'd prefer 1978 level of effects if you actually give us good story. I prefer that hands down over Zack Snyder's nonsense remake, where the effects are all this and that, but it's just the story just suffers, Again, subtlety is the thing. You got to keep subtlety. And for the most part, Dawn of the Dead sticks with that subtlety in that there's still these slow moving zombies. You can take out limited ones and when you know where they are, but the problem is getting them all together in a group, which is terrifying. And that can take, as some of our characters see, they get consequences of getting a little too cocky at some points with that. So that was really great. I like the idea of these characters just trying to survive, just trying to, this little utopia, this little shopping mall that they discovered that hadn't been ransacked or anything. And they were able to clear it of zombies. They're able to kind of survive there for a time and even thrive, for a time because the power stays on, which is kind of mysterious. I think it has its own like power grid or something. So it's kind of it's really interesting. It's fun to watch them, how they're surviving and stuff like that. I have 2 things against the movie, which again, do not ruin the movie in general. Not at all. But the agenda thing is one of them. I'll say first, because I've been kind of hinting at that. There is a woman, a main character. She's one of the 4 main characters who's a woman. Now you find out very shortly in the film that she's pregnant. Okay. Now I'm going to spoil you. That's not something that's so, you know that, but I am going to spoil some stuff. So if just spoiler alert, I'm going to go into some specifics here in a moment. You find out she's pregnant and she becomes an absolute bitch. There's just no other word for it. She's an absolute bitch to the other 3 guys that are trying to help her, trying to make the best of a situation. She's just little Miss Glum all the time. She's like, I'm not going to be your homemaker, and blah, blah, it's typical feminist garbage, lines that don't really, no one was trying to make her their homemaker. But she was sort of napping at one point where they were talking about what to do. And she's like, I want to be included and this and that. Okay, sweetheart. No one was trying to, you were asleep, for crying out loud, or they thought you were asleep. You're in the other room. But anyway, whatever, that's fine. But she, like, they're trying to make the best of a situation. And the guy that's the father of the child with her, he's trying his best to be sweet to her. And they're all like around the mall. They're playing games in the arcade. They're just trying to make the best of a situation. It's horrible. They're trying to be as secure as they can, as safe as they can. And she's just a snot to everybody the whole time. She's there, like, she's even playing dress up, with some of the clothes in the mall at one point, whatever. And the guy takes a picture of her with a camera, is like, oh, strike a pose or something like that, say cheese. Her answers, what, are you going to take it to the drugstore to get it developed? Because they couldn't do that, obviously. And she just pisses on everything that they try to do for her. And there's one scene in particular in which they're all having dinner. They made their dinner. They're having dinner at this table. And the father of the child, he has this television on because they've been trying to catch any broadcasts that come, emergency broadcasts from people, and they've kind of slowed. There's no broadcast at all. But he likes to keep the TV on anyway, volume off, but just keep the TV on just in case something happens. And she said, turn it off. They're not going to do anything. You haven't been in broadcast in ages. And he said, well, you just never know. So he keeps it on in the background, and he comes and sits down at the dinner table. Well, she gets up all frustrated and walks over and just turns the TV off and comes and sits down. Well, he's finally tired of her crap. So he just gets up calmly, walks back over, and turns the TV back on. And then he comes back and sits down, and she goes, what's become of us? And then all of them kind of like put their heads down. I'm like, what's become of us? What's become of you, you horrible garbage person? You're the only one being a complete and total drag on everybody here. It's a horrible situation. Everybody's trying to make the best of it and do what they can, and you're just a bitch, a raving bitch. And now somebody who just wants to defend this movie no matter what will come and say, dude, she's pregnant, man. Come on. Think of how she's worried about her baby coming into the world. There's probably hormones in her body. I mean, come on, man. Cut her some slack. You're right. Why didn't the movie cut her that slack? Because the movie never goes into that. Nowhere do the characters talk about, oh, she's probably worried. Nowhere does she even talk about how she's worried about her baby. Nowhere. In fact, the movie itself goes out of its way to put her on the pedestal as though, guys, she's right. She's right, guys. She's right. How is she right? She's horrible, But again, because she's a woman, she's untouchable. And this was 78, so you started to see this kind of crap really flow into a lot of movies. And that's, you see Romero's progression. It goes from her to Patricia Tallman's character being absurd in the 1990 remake. Now, again, I'm really wailing on this point. It does not ruin the movie, and it's not as blatant in the movie as you watch it, but I'm just talking about it in context of this progression that we're talking about, going from the flack he got from the original Night of the Living Dead to this and to ultimately the remake and stuff. I didn't watch Day of the Dead, and I don't think I'm going to, because Family was telling me that in that one, they get to the idea of where the zombies can learn. And that's just, again, trying to beat you over the head with the they are us and we are them, message, which is dumb. That message works best when it's subtly approached, I think, as I've said. The only other critique I have with Dawn of the Dead is they're not really consistent on, look, are the zombies a danger or are they not? Because you run into this biker gang eventually that just has no problem with the zombies whatsoever. They just pull up in a van, they jump out, there's zombies surrounding them on everywhere, and they're just laughing and punching them or pushing them aside or shooting them this and there. And, our characters that we've been following, and some of them are militarily trained. I mean, they've got really good training. They're getting attacked, in a similar situation, the same kind of situation. So, let's have some continuity. Let's have some keep the context. What's the word I'm looking? Keep it, I don't know, stay steady with that. Are they a threat or are they not? So that was my only other issue with it. But the ending's pretty good. I think the ending's fine. It really, especially the token black guy, because there's just always a token black guy in one of these movies. At least these three that I'm talking about. He has a really good arc, especially in the end. It's really interesting, and The way it ends, I think, is pretty profound. You know, it doesn't beat you over the head with anything. I think that's really good too. So Dawn of the Dead, great zombie flick if you're into that kind of thing. And I'm not a zombie movie aficionado. I don't like, there's nothing about the zombie genre that really draws me into it because it's become so much more than that simple, subtle, profound message, you know, because there is a profound message to the zombie heroes. I mean, there's a loaded archetype right there, you know, the brainless masses, you know, I mean, this, and we've taken to calling everybody, oh, you're a zombie because you people just don't think through things. You're just, you know, agreeing with this or that, you know, all sides calling each other zombies and back. So you know, the sort of the archetype that's there, but it's the lesson, it's the admonition, you know, not to become a zombie in your own life, you know, just shuffling after your appetites, you know. So a lot can be done with it, but I think it's, again, it has to be subtle. And I'm not saying that every other movie's crap because it doesn't do it like this. I know that there are a lot of branches of the genre. You get like the where some of them really get into the reason of it. Is it a medical plague, you know, that's gone awry or skipped out of a laboratory, or is it something else? I mean, one of the things I like about the Night of the Living Dead and the Dawn of the Dead is they never tell you the real reason why this has happened. Night of the Living Dead, I think, did it best, and that's the best movie of them all, the original Night of the Living Dead. It was like a meteor coming by that most people thought maybe that had something to do with it. And it also seems like at the end of Night of the Living Dead that the thing is over. Like the dead aren't still coming back. They're kind of picking off which one to remain, but every person who dies doesn't come back anymore. That's the impression I got anyway of the original one. So I like that. Not really into the big, not a Walking Dead fan. Fanman was saying that the comics are actually pretty good. Maybe they are, but the television series is very naturalistic. And what I mean by naturalistic, I know that can mean a few different things. What I mean by that is very nihilistically, materialistically atheist. Not that, you know, a zombie movie has to be, you know, oh, and here's our church where we worship God. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's nihilistic. There's no innate good in anybody. Everybody is just a murderer waiting to happen. And it's all just nurture. There's no nature. And, you know, everybody's an evil killer waiting to be, you know, and that's kind of what The Walking Dead, you know, really predicated itself on. So I never really got into that. And I'm glad I didn't, knowing where it ended up and everything.